All right, Garrett Blevins here again with part two of beginning powerlifting programs. So we've talked about Prill Pinch chart already, and so I've made it smaller. It's off to the side. If you want more information, look for video one. I'm going to talk about the microcycle now. The microcycle is the next biggest unit, really than just week-to-week powerlifting. If you figure out, what you're going to do this week, a microcycle is going to be weeks put together in some sort of systematic order so that you can have a plan. Really, the number one rule of powerlifting that I have is that if you don't have a plan, plan to fail. I know it sounds stupid, but it's the truth. It really is. If you do not have a plan and you're just going in there bro style and just lifting stuff all over the place being crazy, that might help you when you're just barely starting, but it's not going to really have any sort of progression to it that's going to allow you to surpass your current level and move on to higher levels. So let's talk about the microcycle. Microcycles can be any number of weeks. They can be as short as 6-week microcycles. They can be a full training cycle that may run from 8 to 12 or even 16 weeks. However you do it, you should break it up in a way that makes sense. We'll talk about the macro cycle after this and the various ways that you might program yourself depending on your needs. So let's talk about how you can start a microcycle, and we'll talk about week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 right now. So on week 1, you're going to want to start with your easiest protocol, something that's close to hypertrophy almost. So let's just call this, for sake of ease, your focus for week 1 is going to be 3 sets of 10 on all of your exercises. Some people will do totally different assistance work when they finish the main movements. And by the way, if you don't know, your barbell movement is your main movement. That should always be done at the beginning of the workout. Always start with your main barbell exercise after you are warmed up. The squat, the bench, and the deadlift. There are variations of those lifts, and we'll talk about exercise selection as well coming up in these series. But as far as it matters for right now, we're talking about the squat, bench, and deadlift in their competition format. So that's low bar squatting, probably, unless you're a high bar squatter, but probably low bar squatting, competition grip bench, and either conventional or sumo deadlift from the floor. So let's say week 1, you're doing a 3x10 at 55%, which is going to give you a total of 30 reps. That's going to put you at the top rep range for protocol 1. Next week, 3 sets of 8 at 65%. This gives you a total of 24 reps. Again, 24 reps, that's actually the optimal number. It's in the middle of the range for protocol 1. You've used the lowest percentage for your starting week, which is actually kind of almost a deload week. Would be good if it was coming right after a competition. You were still beat up for this week 1. And then you're moving up to the higher percentage for 3 sets of 8. So next week, let's do 5 sets of 5 at 65% again for a total of 25 reps. Now, this week looks easier because you're like, hey, I was doing sets of 8 with the same weight the week before, and now I'm doing sets of 5. Yeah, but you're doing 2 more sets, so you're going to be more fatigued. As you can see, the total volume for the day has gone up. So in fact, this week, you are moving more weight than you were this week, even though you're doing less sets. I would probably not spend more than 3 weeks in protocol 1. Next week, let's keep it at a 5x5. But now you're going 5x5 at 70 to 75%. Again, for a total of 25 reps. Now, as you can see, same volume between these 2 weeks, same sets and reps, but you've increased the weight slightly. In fact, this 5x5 is probably going to be your bread and butter for your building strength. You've still got enough volume in there where you're going to look maybe like you lift because you're not just doing singles and doubles. And also, it's low enough rep range that you can use heavy weight. All right, now that we've talked about the 5x5, let's look back over here. So you've got 3 weeks at Protocol 1. You're going to need to do at least 2 or 3 weeks on Protocol 2. Let's just, for the sake of ease, let's do another 3 weeks. So as you look at this, you can choose between 3 to 6 sets. So maybe this was a pretty taxing week, so you want to go a little lower on the, or a little higher on the percentage, but a little lower on the rep range. So let's do a 6 sets of 3 reps at 80%. So that's going to come out to 18 reps. Now, as you can see, the percent for this week is only 5% higher maybe than this last week. However, you're doing 6 sets of 3. Not only are you doing less reps per set, but your total volume is quite a bit less. So even though the weight is heavier, this week might not be so hard. And then, depending on how you felt after this week, you know, if you're really still beat up, maybe even bring it down to like a, I don't know, a 5x4 at 70% for 20 total reps. Again, 20 is right here in the range. I'm going to try to keep either at the optimal number or above it. But, you know, if you're really hurting and you need to come in and do 2 sets of 6 or something and come in at a 12 for this protocol, you can do that. You'll have to learn and plan your own programs. These are just basic guidelines. And so if you come in and it's an easy day and you've programmed it out, this is something that'll happen to me every once in a while. I actually have an easy day where I come in feeling strong. Then move the weight faster. Make sure your form is perfect. Make sure your pauses are longer on your benches. Make sure your squats are all the way down to the ground. If it's easy, don't just take a day off. Move the weight faster, move the weight better. If it's a hard day, well, move it as fast as you can and do it as best as you can. And so those are the rules. That's how you're going to make use of those good days. You don't have to throw out or scrap your whole program for the week and then just go for a one rep max or something because you think you can. That's not going to be good in the long haul. You're going to have to learn self-restraint so that you can stick to your plan. So we've got our first 6 weeks mapped out here. Let's talk about the next ones. Week 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to leave it at 10 right now. And I'll talk about that why in a minute here. So now we've had 3 weeks at Protocol 1, 3 weeks at Protocol 2. So let's do our next 3 weeks at Protocol 3. So let's start with a 3x5 at, you know, maybe 82.5%. We're starting to get real fancy right now. For a total of 15 reps for the day. Maybe that's how we're going to run that one. Again, 15 is the optimal number. Hooray for us, we made the optimal number. Next week, let's do maybe a 3x5 at 85%. We've upped our volume a little bit. We're working with heavy weights. The weights on this week are a little bit heavier, but the protocol is the same. And let's go 2x5 at 90 for a total of 10 reps for our last one on Protocol 3. At this point on week 9, we're not so much focused on building anymore. Right now, we've established our strength base through the higher volume days of the program. Now we're starting to hone what we've built so that we can achieve maximal force for a single lift. So, let's look down then what we might be doing on week 10 and maybe week 11. Let's throw it in there. So, Protocol 4. maybe the first day you're doing a 2x2 at 90 through 92.5. So you're doing your first set of 2 reps at 90, second set of 2 reps at 92.5. You can add a rep, you can add percent range in there if you want. It doesn't all have to be at the same percent. You could add a drop set in there. Start at 92.5 and drop down to 90. I don't know. It's up to you. Again, just guidelines. They're not set in stone. They're not, you know, holy where you can't mess with them a little bit and move them around. And this will give you a total of 4, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. And then maybe on week 11, you do a 1x3 at, you know, 90. Or maybe you do a 1x2 at 95. I don't know. It's up to you. And again, you're talking 3 reps, you're talking 2 reps. And then on week 12, if this is a 12-week cycle, test and find out what your actual 1 rep max is. This is a possible microcycle. I didn't have this planned out before. I just thought logically 3 weeks at protocol 1, protocol 2, protocol 3, 2 weeks at protocol 4, and then test. And really the test week is almost protocol 4 anyways. You're doing, you know, maybe if you're doing a mock meet, you're doing 3 sets. You're doing a 3x1 for each lift in a mock meet. That's all it is. That's what a powerlifting competition is a 3x1 on the squat, bench, and deadlift for a total of 9 reps for the day, plus your warm-ups. Just in case it bears noting, all of these are what are called your working sets. These are not your warm-ups. You're going to warm up before you get to your working sets. You can't just sit down and hop in and start doing these weights. You're going to injure yourself, pull a muscle, cramp, all sorts of things can happen. You're always going to warm up and then move into your working sets. So this is what a microcycle might look like. 12 weeks is kind of long for a microcycle, but let me compare that. I'll compare that in the next video to what I mean when I talk about a macro cycle.